Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first edition of what we are defining as Yet Again and Friends, where we at Yet Again give you the opportunity to hear firsthand and ask questions to a survivor of one of the atrocities that we have covered on Yet Again. We're delighted to be joined this evening by Hasan Hasanović, a survivor of the genocide in Srebrenica. He's an author, interpreter, curator, and speaks publicly about his story of survival during the genocide. Hasan and I met this time last year when we were working on HMD Scotland together. I heard him share his testimony in the Scottish Parliament, in civic ceremonies, in prisons, and never got tired of hearing the vital lessons that can be learned from his experiences. We're going to speak for about half an hour and then open it up to any questions you may have. Feel free to either put them in the chat box, send them to Jaya, Joe, or I, or raise your hand and we can invite you to unmute when the time comes. But for now, Hasan, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll hand over to you.
Okay. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight before this group of young people. I'm now in Sarajevo, the Bosnian capital, where I speak from. I work for Srebrenica Genocide Memorial, so it's been about 11 years since I've been there. I've been to Scotland twice speaking for the Holocaust Memorial Day, and I would gladly come back, every time. Of course, such a wonderful country with such amazing people. Of course, you do such a great job remembering the Holocaust and all the subsequent genocides, and I do congratulate and applaud to all of you there. Thank you because of future generations. We really do have to remember. If we don't, it's going to happen again. It definitely. You can easily tell how political circumstances change and bring up sometimes really dangerous politicians that are really always ready to change the subject, and then things go out of hand and out of control, and all of a sudden, all those elements of genocide build one up against the other, and then we eventually, when things go wrong, and when something like genocide happened, and we wonder how is it possible. It is always possible. We, in every society, in every country, in every state, we have human rights violations. So always as individuals we can stand up against these injustices. For targeted groups, which are allegedly different because of the scala of skin, religion, or anything else. So tonight I'm here to speak about what happened to me, which is pretty much difficult every time, and I always say, I'm not gonna do it, but when I receive an invitation from the people who have never heard about the story of this genocide, Bosnian genocide, I forced myself into wanting to do that, and because of you, of young people. So I was born in Serbia. My village was on the other side of the river, Drina River, which is a natural border between the two states, Bosnia and Serbia. At the time, it was one state, Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia, with Josip Broz as a president for life. I spent about 13, 14 years in my village, which was really small village. It was a Muslim village because, you know, people in villages lived like separated. You know, you would have Muslim and Serb villages, and people in cities and towns were, you know, mixed, and suburbs. And but I don't, you know, quite remember first 5 years of my life, but I do remember when um, I was 5, and when Josip Broz Tito, president of Yugoslavia, died, everybody was crying and sobbing in my house because he died, and I did not care that much because I was just a little boy who, you know, wanted to play, and that's it. And of course remember first day in school when I started going to school, and I had my twin brother. We were in the same class. It was difficult because, you know, we lived in the village. We had to work the fields, take care of our cows, and everything else, and at the same time go to school and and be good students. And both my father and grandfather used to work in Croatia and were most of the time away. So we had to help. I had to help my mother, my grandmother, to work the fields and to catch up with all the work in the fields, which was not easy. Sometimes you would have to get up really early in the morning, then work throughout the whole day, then come back home, you know, when it was getting dark. And this was actually happening throughout the whole summer, sometimes in the spring, sometimes even in the autumn. The winter would be always easy, you know, where, you know, people would stay home because of snow. We had evening parties. We used to produce a lot of our own food. Today, you know, in the world, it's called organic food because, you know, within, let's say, 150 kilometers in circle, there was nothing which could pollute the air. You know, even now I remember, you know, every time I buy vegetables, every time, I always remember the smell of beautiful tomatoes and peppers, cucumbers, and everything else from my garden. And now it's all industrialized, and it doesn't smell even near that. And of course, conclusion is clear that it's not even near healthy as it was, you know, when I lived in my village. So we basically produced everything. We just had to buy a few items in the shop, which was, you know, like 5 kilometers far from our village. Everything was far. We didn't have a good road. Um, but, you know, many people worked abroad. Um, and they invested in their houses. So many houses before the war were beautiful houses, you know, like my house, with a white facade, beautiful red terracotta roof, sidewalks around, you know, around my house, beautiful balcony, a beautiful garden with plum trees. So remember, you know, we would eat, especially in the summer, we would eat our breakfast on the balcony, a huge balcony, and mostly eat our dinner there and enjoy the summer night, you know. And um, so, of course, always remember those beautiful times. And we used to play as kids a lot, you know. Uh, we had lots of fruit trees. And we were healthy all the time. You know, we played, and sometimes, you know, in the snow we were wet, but we were never sick because we ate healthy food, And I used to walk to my school for about 4 kilometers. Then I continued my primary schooling. I even had to go later from the fifth grade even further. It's about 8 kilometers one way and 8 kilometers the other way. And it was just our kids, nobody was there with us. So we would have sticks, sometimes, to protect us from being attacked by animals. You could even come across a bear, or a wolf, or, it's, a very dangerous snake. I used to actually, as a kid, I used to collect herbs, mushrooms, fruits, and sell those for money, and have my own pocket money. Today, young people, they are trying to find scholarships, for their education. That was my scholarship. I was making my own scholarship. Uh, that was not necessary because both of my father and my grandfather, used to make good money, but I just wanted to contribute to the family, and it was actually a beautiful life which I was not aware of. I was very happy to have my twin brother in the same class. I was very shy, and he was totally unlike me. He was very popular, and I remember when we were eighth grade of primary school, he had a girlfriend, and I was very, very, very shy, and so they would they would recognize me by saying, it's Hussein's twin brother. Everybody knew him, and not many people knew me because I was very shy, and I really loved playing football. My twin brother was better in drawing, in maths and physics. I was really good at Russian language, history, geography, and he used to help me, in many subjects. He was more mature than me. When I would say something wrong, he would correct me and say, that was not right thing to say. And we were not identical twins, so people could differentiate. They could tell difference between the two of us. But we used to wear the same clothes. I even have the photograph from the eighth grade where we wear the same clothes, the same. Everything was the same on us, on the both of us. So people, by wearing the same clothes, people could tell that we were twins, even though physically we were different. I also had a younger brother who is 4 years younger than me. I had no sisters. In the same village, I also had another pair of uh, uh, grandparents, because my mother got married in the same village. So I had two grandfathers, two grandmothers in the same village. So it was a big advantage because I could visit both, and enjoy all the benefits, of course, of having both grandparents in the same village. Um, I remember, I used to watch the television and watch the movies, and loved watching tennis, skiing, of course. And I would watch some images from the big cities, and I remember once I was sobbing, thinking that I got stuck in that village and that I would never ever see the world. Thinking that people living in the cities were more happier, and of course I was very wrong, at the time, because from this perspective, I've been living in cities ever since, after the genocide, and I think, my life in that village was something that I would wish for my daughter, which is impossible now, because my village is burned down. It's not there anymore. It's there, but there is nothing. It's just rubbles and bushes. And I'm a there is a documentary which is about the Holocaust. It's called Condemned to Remember. It's a story about Tommy Ranhentil, who lives now in Ireland, who lost 35 members of his family in Slovakia. It's about him, but the film ends with Srebrenica genocide, and at the end of the film, he visits his village in Slovakia, where it's just like a meadow overgrown in weeds and bushes, and that's the same image of my village, and I only have memories like Tommy had, when he visits that his ex village. But you can still hear voices of happiness, from that time. It's always in my memory. So as long as we tell our stories, these memories will be forever remember. And yeah, I had, as you can conclude, very happy life in my village, which did not unfortunately last for long. I started going to secondary school. I moved from my village to a small town, Bratunac. But things went wrong. We had first democratic elections. We had a referendum on independence. Bosnia was on the path of independence, and Serbs in Bosnia, led by today's convicted war criminal Radovan Karadzic, they were trying to set up their own parastate in Bosnia, which they called the Bosnian Serb Republic. But they designated this territory, and at least half of this this territory was a territory where Muslims, Bosnians lived in the majority, which is Srebrenica area, where I lived, and so these areas, when the war started, were occupied. People were expelled. Thousands were killed. So I had, to run from Bratunac, where I lived, because it was occupied. Many people were killed. 64% of the population were Muslims, Bosnians. And the question is here, how minority was able to occupy the majority? Because it's simple. They had weapons. They were armed from Serbia, supported from Serbia, and they could do that. And I had to run through the forest with my family, got to Srebrenica, spent in Srebrenica about 4 years. I lived under the siege with over 60,000 people who had fled from the occupied territories, and we had a resistance in Srebrenica by the Bosnians who resisted the occupation with hunting rifles, handmade weapons, and when it was no longer possible to resist, Srebrenica was designated as safe UN area, safe UN haven. Before it became safe area, when I got to Srebrenica, we lived in an apartment of my uncle who fled to Tuzla with his family, so we could stay there. We had no food, of course, but we learned that our village, the village where I grew up, was burned down by our neighbors. So I went there. My grandfather, father of my father, committed a suicide, because he had it enough, so he couldn't, because he thought that we were all killed in Bratunac. My grandmother died because of diabetes, and it was very tough for my father. So he went to this village. I came later and to visit them, and it was so sad seeing my people from my village living in forest like animals, because village was burned down. So they built huts for people and on one side, huts for animals on the other side. I spent there for about 2 months living their lives when they were shooting from Serbia with heavy weapons. We had to hide underground. They could come anytime to the forest and kill everyone. We did not have any protection. We only had our animals, our cows and sheep and other animals. Then, after 2 months, I left the forest. I went back to Srebrenica to that apartment with my two brothers. There was nobody. We had nobody to prepare any food for us, but we had a young girl across the from us. She would come and prepare bread for us, and so after a while, my father and my mother came from the forest because forest was attacked from Serbia. Almost all animals were killed. People were not killed because they got under the ground. So they brought personal belongings and food on the animal cart. They brought it to Srebrenica. So we knew that we will need to have food for later. So many refugees started to arrive to Srebrenica because there was ongoing offensive on the other areas around. Many people were dying. So in March 1993, the commander of the United Nations for Bosnia arrived and proclaimed Srebrenica a safe UN area, safe UN haven. I was there listening to his speech. I was happy that that the war could come to an end. But a month later, I went to the playground to play football with my friends. We thought it would be a peaceful day. We were, for months we couldn't get out because of the shooting. So we wanted to breathe in the fresh air for a while. And it was a big mistake. I was watching, this football game with my friends, and a grenade fell like 4 meters in front of me. And then more of the shelling happened, and I was unconscious because of the explosion. And when I got back to my conscience, boys of my age were massacred, headless, armless, legless, and those who were still alive were screaming. And I was under a big shock, and I, ran away from the site to a nearby house. So many boys were killed there, and girls. 74 were killed, 100 were wounded. And when I came home, I ran home, and everybody thought that I was dead. Later in my dreams, I was dreaming about this crime, and it was a big shock. It was a big. My mother was trying to calm me down. It was a big shock. So I thought, okay, I survived this, so I'll be able to cope with my life later somehow. But I didn't even know that was just the beginning of my suffering. And a few days later, Srebrenica was proclaimed a safe area. It was later easier for about 2 years. I went back to school. I started going to school. We didn't have anything, just one notebook, and that's it. No textbooks, nothing. It was really difficult with food. People were starving to death. I had some, corn, some wheat. We could survive, but we didn't have any salt, any hygiene stuff, no clothes, no shoes. That was really difficult, and no electricity, no running water. I had to go to the water spring. I had to bring uh, um, wood from the forest on my back for the heating. It. I had met, friends who I wanted to spend some time with, just to try to survive those difficult times. Many of them are now dead. I remember, um, I had two friends, really good friends, and they wanted to play music, but we didn't have electricity. So one day we went to Samir's house. His uncle was electrical engineer, and he said to us, now you can play music. We got into a room. He had a big bicycle with an accumulator. So he set up the whole setting there, so I could get on the bike, pedal the bike, make electricity, so my friends could plug in an electric guitar and play music, play the Beatles songs. We loved the Beatles songs, and we they I was not talented, they were talented, and they played the guitar, and we sang, and we used to go to English courses, English, German courses, French. We read books. We were dreaming, for a better life, which actually never came for many of us. We were, dreaming to run to America after the war, to live American dream. That actually never happened. We had the Canadian battalion of the United Nations, and later Dutch battalion. People usually ask me, would it be different, if somebody else was instead of the Dutch in 1995 when Srebrenica fell. I just tell them one experience from the Canadian soldiers. I was passing by the base, by the bunker, and one boy wanted to trade an alcohol, homemade alcohol, with probably food or clothes. The guard, that Canadian soldier, was not interested. So we tried to explain to him what that was, and we talked him into wanting to drink that plum brandy, and he liked it, and we were encouraging him to drink more, and he became so drunk he couldn't stand on his feet. So then we decided to play with him. We put him on the side of the bunker, on those sandbags. We put his helmet, his rifle in the right position, and we said to one another, we'll let him go in a second and count how many seconds he will stand as a real soldier. He became our toy. So the moment we let him go, at once he collapsed, boom, and we all laughed, and we put him right back on, and we went on with playing, which was big fun. And then probably as an officer was running through a base with a pistol, so we all ran back home. So this was the United Nations, and later the Dutch were also involved in prostitution and black marketing, and marketing, and I'm not saying that all soldiers were like this, but there were individuals who were irresponsible in terms of behavior. I even wrote a letter, because it was impossible to communicate with anybody outside of the siege. And I gave a letter to a Dutch soldier, to my cousins. I wrote to my cousins who lived, who are from Srebrenica. They went to Netherlands as refugees. So I did not provide an address. So he kept this letter for 23 years. And when our museum was opened, I got the letter back, and I donated that letter as an artifact to our memorial. So it will be exhibited probably this year, and with my video story about this. No, this is actually the project that I'm working now. Another 100 people will do the same. Talk about their personal belongings. So this all went until July 1995, and Srebrenica was attacked again by the Bosnian Serb army. The United Nations didn't want to defend it. The world was not interested to stop the genocide. And Srebrenica fell. My mother, younger brother, grandparents from the mother side went to the UN base, hoping to be protected there, which is outside of Srebrenica-Potočari. And majority of men and boys were reluctant to go there because they were afraid that they would be separated and killed. This actually happened to all men and boys who went to the UN base. They were all separated by Serb soldiers and killed later. Us who didn't go there, we tried to walk through the forest. We called this death march. So I went with my twin brother, my uncle, my father, and all of them were killed. I'm the only one who survived. It took me 6 days, 6 nights to escape. Did not sleep, did not eat. I just had a little sugar that a friend of my father gave it to me before he was captured. I was very afraid. I could not believe that was the end of my life. I wanted to live. The feeling that I had is beyond explanation. How I felt being prosecuted, and I could not understand that. Of course, how can you be chased by another human beings as an animal? And I survived. And I cannot really go into details from one day to the other because, it would take me another half hour at least. When I survived, I reunited with a part of my family, my younger brother, mother, grandparents from the mother side. After 2 weeks, I found them at Tuzla airport where the refugees were. Later, I went back to school, to university, started working at the memorial. I buried my father first, and my twin brother later, 2 years later. I buried my father in 2003. What is interesting was that, before I came to the cemetery, local sort of police stopped us there, telling us that we couldn't proceed with the bus because of a traffic jam. So we had to walk. As we started to walk on the side of the street, there were local Serbs who spat on us, who were yelling, calling names. And I was going to bury my father at the same as I was being spat at by even war criminals. I felt like no human being, and I buried my father. And then later I buried my twin brother 2 years later. And that was the worst day in my life. I had to put his bones in the grave in my hands. And I was barely alive. My heart was pounding, racing so fast. And just 4 years later, I got back to work for the memorial. I was destroyed both physically and psychologically. Before those burials, I had pretty good life. I was an interpreter. I was dating, having fun, partying, like normal human beings, everywhere. So these two burials, hit me that hard, that actually have changed my life forever. Ever since, every day of my life is about genocide, keeping the memory alive for the future, without hatred, with the message of hope for future. We cannot. The only way to teach people is to make sure that we tell the story in such a sensitive way that people are just learning from it without wrong conclusions. I don't want my story, to affect people in the wrong way, to make them think that they should hate people. If I don't hate people, why should those who haven't lived through this terrible suffering, why they should hate? They have no reason. So besides all of that, we had, later, the over 7,000 of our victims were found in mass graves, identified through DNA, properly were buried. We have our memorial there, which is the state memorial for which I work. the whole world has recognized this genocide. The Hague Tribunal held trials, established that as genocide judicially, the ICJ and other UN tribunal, and still our neighbors, Serbs living in Bosnia, Serbs living in Serbia, because of their political elites, they have never admitted it. On the contrary, they do everything to downplay it, to minimize it, to revise it. And this is all going to have a really a really dangerous effect on our future, because if they continue doing that, it might happen again, because they are educating generations of young people with hatred, with wrong perceptions of the past. They celebrate war criminals, Karadzic, Mladic, Milosevic as heroes. The war criminals are published authors. They sell their books in the book fairs. You can buy those books in bookstores. And they teach them that this never happened. And it has to stop. It has to end. And if it doesn't end, I'm afraid that it's going to happen again. And this is what I'm fighting for, and a memorial for the world to narrow the space of these deniers and revisionists, and just for the better future of all of us. So I will stop here. I don't know how much time I have spent. It's impossible to tell this huge story and huge experience in such a short period. I have skipped so many very important details, especially from the Death March, just because, I want to, leave the floor to you to ask me some questions if you have some questions.
Thank you so much, Hasan. That was incredibly powerful. Like I said earlier, we've got some time set aside for questions. I know, Anna, you had a question to ask. If you want to unmute, go ahead. Okay, maybe not. Does anybody else have a question to ask? Anna's having tech issues, fair enough.
Yeah,
Joe, go for it.
Yeah,
Joe, go for it.
Yeah, do you think internationally we've learned any lessons from Srebrenica?
It's a pretty difficult question. For a long time, I thought that we haven't. I mean, that the world hasn't learned that lesson. But it looks like that things have changed and are slowly moving to the direction that we all want. The story of Srebrenica genocide, now is internationally recognized, respected. So what is left is to, as I have already said, is to narrow the space for deniers and revisionists, to tell them that it's uncivilized to do that. If they continue doing that, they cannot become the member of the European Union and should not be ever admitted in European Union if they do that. I mean, imagine having a country where Nazis are celebrated as heroes. That country should be expelled from the European Union. And we had some trends of in some parts of European Union of reviving of the wrong ideologies from the past, and so the United Nations haven't learned from the lessons of Srebrenica, not a bit, but politicians have different priorities on their agendas, so we have to make them to prioritize these things, and to understand that this is very, very important. I hope that European Union will understand this as very important. I used to speak in a webinar of European Commission last year, a few months ago in July. There were very, very important people there, you know, the top politicians, and I was very, very critical, you know, because I, you know, want to, you know, I want to wake them up, and it's because we have to be very, very vigilant. If we are not, then things, you know, slowly go to that dangerous direction. But I think time is now to teach about this, you know, and we are creating at the memorial right now, as I speak, creating school curriculums for our schools, for our universities, which will be given to schools and universities abroad. I'm also working, I'm not working on that, but I'm working actually on the video presentations, video teaching modules for universities, which includes some of the survivor stories and professionals talking about different issues. The key is education. You know, if it is taught in schools, universities, then we can hope for something better. We can because if it is forgotten, then it will happen again, and it's, you know, inevitably.
Eloise, I think you had something to ask.
Yeah, hi Hasan, thank you so much for sharing your testimony with us this evening. What do you think could have or should have been done to prevent this genocide?
I think, yeah, definitely, you know, we should talk about it. You know, this subject has to be taught in schools, universities. We should remember these in commemorations during the an event series to make sure that it's never forgotten. States should enact laws incriminating denial of this genocide, which is, I think, very important. And we should try to reconcile, you know, groups should reconcile, but to understand the process of reconciliation, you know, it's impossible to reconcile while you have denial. Denial is the wall between the two sides, you know, which should reconcile. How can you expect from a mother to reconcile with perpetrators if her pain is not recognized, if her stories is being denied? It's impossible, of course. This is why, you know, these states have to admit this, have to recognize this with no exceptions. You know, Serbalites, they say it was just crime, not genocide, and they mention some crimes happen against Serbs, but this is something which you cannot bargain about. You know, we had the United Nations tribunals, especially the Hague Tribunal, the ICTY, which has dealt with facts. The facts are there. You cannot talk about facts. It's you know, the truth. The truth is much worse than the judicially established facts. The tribunal deals with facts, not with emotions. So what is in between those lines in the verdicts are survivor stories which are not there. We should tell them and show them in our memorial and show them to the whole world, you know. So I think we should be very persistent and never give up, but always with the sense for future, to make sure that people don't hate, It's very, very important. You know, in spite of what happened to me, I love every human being, and I cannot even think even to hate war criminals, because it's not me. It's against me. It's against my heart. You know, because people's hearts are poisoned with hatred. This is what the media did, propaganda of those deniers and those revisionists. And people have actually no chance to hear this story, because they are telling them it's a lie. You should not even listen to those stories. And I just want them to think, and I just want to tell them that they should just close their eyes and for the moment to forget the names of people, their religion, their ethnic identity, and just listen to the human stories and open your heart. Then you will see. And this is the main thing, the main thing. Just us as human beings, not us and them, us and them, us and them. That's the main problem. It should not be us and them. It should be only us as humanity. I'm you and you are me. This is not just my story, it's yours as well. Because the crime of genocide is crime against all humanity. As much as it concerns me, it should also be of your concern. And it's not just the matter of it's not my story. No, yes, it's your story. The Holocaust is my story as well. Whoever denies the Holocaust denies this genocide. This is how I see it, and I have to stand up against that as a human being.
Thank you, Hasan. Anna, have you resolved your tech problems?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your testimony, Hasan.
Welcome.
By us all here. With everything that's going on in the world today, what message or advice would you give to young people working to educate others about genocide?
I think it's very important to share the stories of all subsequent genocides, stories of ordinary people, so people will be able to connect. We all have fathers, mothers. Many of us have brothers and sisters. And when people tell their stories, it's not difficult to identify, to create an empathy. So I think educating people about these subsequent genocides, alongside with the Holocaust as the major, as the biggest crime of all times, and there should not be any competition. There is enough room for everyone, enough platform for all these crimes, and I think survivors' testimonies, memoirs should be used for education. I think that's the key. And the governments, every government should understand that this is very, very important. And I'm sure that the Scottish government does really understand the importance of this. And I don't think that every country in the European Union understands or does the best in this sense. I mean, how can you explain migrants coming from mainly East and not being allowed into European Union as human beings? And we have thousands of them in Bosnia. Nobody wants them, Serbs living in Bosnia, they don't want them to stay on their territory. And they are staying here with us because they are telling them they are yours. can you imagine that, like, they are like Muslims, and they don't know that half of these migrants are not Muslims. There are many agnostics, there are many atheists, there are many Christians, and just because they are black, just because they are dark, they say they are Muslims, and we don't want them, and European Union, put up a barbed wire, and they don't want them, and you have children, people are suffering, and I think it should not be that way, It's winter, it's very cold, and they are freezing, everywhere.
Thank you. We've got time for one last question. I'd like to hand over to Jack Street. Thank you.
Hi, yeah, Hasan, thank you so much for telling your story to us this evening. What do you think the role of the media is in stopping denialism, ensuring that genocides like these don't happen again, or in preventing them, and holding those that are responsible to account?
It's a really good question. I mean, the role of media is a key, because that's the only way how to pass these stories on. I mean, on those who should know them, and if I mean, the media can educate people on all of these issues that you have mentioned, on denial, on revisionism, to make sure that people do understand, and that politicians understand what's going on, and then try to do something about that. Media also played a terrible role during this war. We had a really unbelievable propaganda which was created by Milosevic's regime, and which actually dehumanized many other groups like Muslims, Croats, Albanians, and others, paving a path for future crimes, and it's always, when people start to think, us and them, and that they are trying to jeopardize us because, they are taking our I mean, it's always like, one group is endangered, jeopardized by the other group, and then they create stories about that, distort facts, and then mobilize that group, make them think that they should be afraid, and they should take weapons and fight against that group. And it's just I think really important to research this, and to study the role of media and propaganda in preparing any war, because that's just the beginning, and this is why, when a politician says something, it's really important, and it should be really held to an account. I mean, we had the Trump as the president of the United States, and you've seen, in practice, how political messages change the whole thing, and how it is dangerous, and this is why I think the role of media is beyond important in both directions, in preventing the actual genocide and preparing the actual genocide, both.
Thank you so much, Hasan. I think we actually could probably squeeze in one last question. Lucy, I think you had something to ask. Thank you so much, Sam, for talking to us tonight. I really appreciate it, as does everyone else here tonight. My question for you is, what did it mean to you to have the perpetrators prosecuted in The Hague?
I mean, it's just less than 170 perpetrators were brought to the Hague Tribunal. And I think 90% were Serbs. That's the proportion, the approximate proportion of war crimes committed by the Serb forces in former Yugoslavia, mainly in Bosnia. And we had thousands of actual soldiers who were killing people in the ground. They were never brought to justice. So the Hague Tribunal, in my understanding, brought these individuals, mainly political figures, military figures, and a few soldiers, that would testify against them, just to create facts, establish facts for future, because it's really important to have impartial facts, especially when you deal with denial. They could tell, they could say, okay, it's just your stories, your perception of the past. But when you have a tribunal, the UN tribunal, which established an ocean of fact, common sense cannot deny that. If you do that, then you must be insane, or I mean, it was important, that we have that recognition that the genocide happened, that our story, our pain is recognized in the way. But at the same time, we know that many of those perpetrators, 98% of them, will never be brought to justice, and they live normal lives. I hope not that they don't live normal lives, that they at least have terrible dreams, as they deserve to have. They live in our communities. They are bad teachers to children. They sometimes celebrated as heroes, and this is what really hurts. And you cannot expect from a small tribunal, to bring thousands of perpetrators. It was impossible. That during the trial to Nazis in Nuremberg, that just a few people were brought there for the entire Holocaust, and it's very similar, and the Holocaust was denied. People could not speak about that for 30 years. The traces of their existence were erased. New people settled in their homes as they never lived there. I mean, such intensity of injustice inflicted on one people, the Jews at the time, and very similar was done against us here. Which is, I mean, every genocide resembles the other genocide. It's not the same, but very similar. And people die and suffer.
Thank you so much, Hasan, for joining us this evening and being our first event in our series of Yet Again and Friends in conversation with. It's an absolute privilege and a pleasure to have you. We marked Holocaust Memorial Day yesterday, asking how we can be the light in the darkness for survivors of genocide and for those who unfortunately did not make it. And I think you've given us incredible tools to do that this evening. So thank you so much for joining us. We thoroughly appreciate it. And good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.